Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author and robot, and today is going to be a bit more of a kind of pep talk because this comes up a lot when I'm giving writing advice or just life advice in general. And I don't know, I don't want to say I talk to a lot of people, but I talk to a decent number of people. And this is a philosophy that comes up a lot for me. And so I want to share something that I constantly think about when I am doubting and how it can be applied to your work or your actions or yourself when you go about them. Now, I don't want to spoil exactly what it is first. I'm going to read for you a passage from something. I'll complete with the rest of the passage at the end. I'm gonna read for you two different passages from the same thing, but I don't want to tell you where the passage is from yet because there's a mild bias to it. So before we get started, we've got a writing event going on the channel. Link is in the description down below. Join the Patty Wagon, take the prompt, write a 750-word story, submit, have it read next month, December, and join the Patty Wagon. There are so many talented writers who have submitted so far. Join. Please join. I swear I'm not lonely. I just want to talk to you. Oh no. Anyway, that's all that there is. I don't think I'm going to waste a whole lot of time before getting into the reading because the reading is going to be a decent chunk, but I hope that you'll, sit back, relax, listen, and take in what I'm about to say. Some people are going to recognize it immediately. There are a lot of haters for this content, and maybe it's the first time that you've heard it. So, please bear with me.
Thousands of years ago, the first man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake he taught his brothers to light. He was considered an evildoer who had dealt with a demon mankind dreaded. But thereafter, men had fire to keep them warm, to cook their food, to light their caves. He had left them a gift they had not conceived, and he had lifted darkness of the earth. Centuries later, the first man invented the wheel. He was probably torn on the rack he had taught his brothers to build. He was considered a transgressor who ventured into forbidden territory, but thereafter, men could travel past any horizon. He had left them a gift they had not conceived, and he had opened the roads of the worlds. That man, the unsubmissive and first, stands in the opening chapter of every legend mankind has recorded about its beginning. Prometheus was chained to a rock and torn by vultures because he had stolen the fire of the gods. Adam was condemned to suffer because he had eaten the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Whatever the legend, somewhere in the shadows of its memory, mankind knew that its glory began with one, and that one paid for his courage. Throughout the centuries, there were men who took first steps down new roads armed with nothing but their own visions. Their goals differed, but they all had this in common, that the step was first, the road new, the vision unburrowed, and the response they received, hatred. The great creators, the thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors, stood alone against the men of their time. Every great new thought was opposed. Every great new invention was denounced. The first motor was considered foolish. The airplane was considered impossible. The power loom was considered vicious. Anesthesia was considered sinful. And the men of unburrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. No creator was prompted by a desire to serve his brothers, for his brothers rejected his gifts he offered, and that gift destroyed the slothful routine of their lives. His truth was his only motive, his own truth, and his own work to achieve it in his own way. A symphony, a book, an engine, a philosophy, an airplane, or a building, that was his goal and his life. Not those who heard, read, operated, believed, flew, or inhabited the thing that he had created. The creation, not its user. The creation, not the benefit others derived from it. The creation, which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men. His vision, his strength, his courage came from his own spirit. A man's spirit, however, is his self. That entity, which is his consciousness. To think, to feel, to judge, to act are functions of the ego. The creators were not selfless. It is the whole secret of their power, that it was the self-sufficient, self-motivated, self-generated. A first cause, a font of energy, a life force, a prime mover. The creators served nothing and no one. He lived for himself. And only by living for himself was he able to achieve the things which are the glory of mankind, which is the nature of achievement. Man cannot survive but through his mind. He comes on earth unarmed, his brain is his only weapon. Animals obtain food by force. Man has no claws, no fangs, no horns, no great strength of muscle. He must plant his food or hunt it. To plant, he needs a process of thought. To hunt, he needs a weapon, and to make weapons, a process of thought. From the simplest necessity to the highest religious abstraction, from the wheel to the skyscraper, everything we are and everything that we have comes from a single attribute of man, the function of his reasoning mind. But the mind is an attribute of the individual. There is no such thing as a collective brain. There is no such thing as a collective thought. An agreement reached by a group of men is only a compromise, or an average drawn upon many individual thoughts. It is a secondary consequence. The primary act, the process of reason, must be performed by each man alone. We can divide a meal among many men. We cannot digest it as a collective stomach. No man can use his lungs to breathe for another man. No man can use his brain to think for another. No man can use his brain to think for another. All the functions of the body and spirit are private. They cannot be shared or transferred. We inherit the products of the thoughts of other men. We inherit the wheel. We make a cart. The cart becomes an automobile. The automobile becomes a plane. But all through the process of what we receive from others is only the end product of their thinking. The moving force is the creative faculty, which takes this product as material, uses it, and originates it to the next step. This creative faculty cannot be given or received, shared or borrowed. It belongs to single individual men. That which it creates is the property of the creator. Men learn from one another, but all learning is only the exchange of materials. No man can give another man the capacity to think, yet that capacity is our only means of survival. Nothing is given to man on earth. Everything he needs has to be produced, and here man faces his basic alternative. He can survive in only one of two ways: by the independent work of his own mind, or as a parasite fed by the minds of others. The creator originates, the parasite borrows. The creator faces nature alone, the parasite faces nature through an intermediary. The creator's concern is the conquest of nature, the parasite's concern is the conquest of men. The creator lives for his work. He needs no other men. His primary goal is within himself. The parasite lives second-hand. He needs others. Others become his prime motive. The basic need of the creator is independence. The reasoning mind cannot work under any form of compulsion. It cannot be curbed, sacrificed, or subordinated by any consideration whatsoever. It demands total independence to function in motive. To a creator, all relations with men are secondary. The basic need of the second-hander is to secure his ties with men in order to be fed. He places relations first. He declares that man exists in order to serve others. He preaches altruism. Altruism is the doctrine which demands that man live for others and place others above the self. No man can live for another. He cannot share his spirit just as he cannot share his body. But the second-hander has used altruism as a weapon of exploitation and reversed the base of mankind's moral principles. Men have been taught every precept that destroys the Creator. Men have been taught dependence as a virtue. The man who attempts to live for others is a dependent. He is a parasite in motives and makes parasites of those he serves. The relationship produces nothing but mutual corruption. It is impossible in concept. The nearest approach to it in reality, the man who lives to serve others, is the slave. If physical slavery is repulsive, how much more repulsive is the concept of servility of the spirit? The conquered slave has the vestige of honor. He has the merit of having resisted it and of considering his condition evil. But the man who enslaves himself voluntarily in the name of love is the basest of creatures. He degrades the dignity of man and he degrades the concept of love. But this is the essence of altruism. Men have been taught that the highest virtue is not to achieve, but to give. Yet one cannot give that which has not been created. Creation comes before distribution, and there will be nothing to distribute. The need of the Creator comes before the need of any possible beneficiary, yet we are taught to admire the second-hander who dispenses the gifts he has not produced above the man who made the gifts possible. We praise an act of charity. We shrug at an act of achievement. Men have been taught that the first concern is to relieve the suffering of others, but suffering is a disease. Should one come upon it, one tries to give relief and assistance. To make that the highest test of virtue is to make suffering the most important part of life. Then, man must wish to see others suffer in order that he may be virtuous. Such is the nature of altruism. The Creator is not concerned with disease, but with life. Yet the work of the creators has eliminated one form of a disease after another in man's body and spirit and brought more relief from suffering than any altruist could ever conceive. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to agree with others, but the Creator is the man who disagrees. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to swim with the current, but the Creator is the man who goes against the current. Men have been taught that it is a virtue to stand together, but the Creator is the man who stands alone. Men have been taught that the ego is a synonym of evil and selflessness the ideal of virtue, but the Creator is the egoist in the absolute sense, and the selfless man is the one who does not think, feel, judge, or act. These are functions of the self. Here the basic reversal is the most deadly. The issue has been perverted, and men have been left no alternative and no freedom. As poles of good and evil, he was offered two conceptions: egotism and altruism. Egotism was held to mean the sacrifice of others to self. Altruism, the sacrifice of self to others. This tied man irrevocably to other men and left him nothing but a choice of pain. His own pain borne for the sake of others, or pain inflicted upon others for the sake of self. When it was added that man must find joy in self-immolation, the trap was closed. Man was forced to accept masochism as his ideal, under the threat that sadism was the only alternative. This was the greatest fraud ever perpetuated on mankind. This was the device by which dependence and suffering were perpetuated as fundamentals of life. The choice is not self-sacrifice or domination. The choice is independence or dependence, the code of the Creator or the code of the second-hander. This is the basic issue. It rests upon the alternative of life or death. The code of the Creator is to build on the needs of the reasoning mind, which allows man to survive. The code of the second-hander is built on the needs of the mind and capable of survival. All that which proceeds from man's independent ego is good. All that proceeds from upon men's dependence upon men is evil. The egotist in the absolute sense is not the man who sacrifices others. He is the man who stands above the need of using others in any manner. He does not function through them. He is not concerned with them in any primary manner. Not in his aim, not in his motive, not in his thinking, not in his desires, not in the source of his energy. He does not exist for any other men, and he asks no other man to exist for him. This is the only form of brotherhood and mutual respect possible between This is the only form of brotherhood and mutual respect possible between men. Degrees of ability vary, but the basic principle remains the same. The degrees of a man's independence, initiative, and personal love for his work determines his talent as a worker and his worth as a man. Independence is the only gauge of human virtue and value. What a man is and makes of himself, not what he has or hasn't done for others. There is no substitute for personal dignity. There's no standard of personal dignity except independence. In all proper relationships, there is no sacrifice of anyone to anyone. An architect needs clients, but he does not subordinate his work to their wishes. They need him, but they do not order a house just to give him a commission. Men exchange their work by free mutual consent to mutual advantage when their personal interests agree and they both desire the exchange. If they do not desire it, they are not forced to deal with each other. They seek further. This is the only possible form of relationship between equals. Anything else is a relationship of a slave to master or a victim to executioner. No work is ever done collectively by a majority decision. Every creative job is achieved under the guidance of a single individual thought. An architect requires a great many men to erect his building, but he does not ask them to vote on his design. They work together by free agreement, and each is free in his proper function. An architect uses steel, glass, concrete produced by others, but the materials remain just as much steel, glass, and concrete until he touches them. What he does with them is his individual product and his individual property. This is the only pattern for proper cooperation among men. The first right on earth is the right of the ego. Man's first duty is to himself. His moral law is never to place his prime goal within the persons of others. His moral obligation is to do what he wishes, provides his wish does not depend primarily upon other men. This includes the whole sphere of his creative faculty, his thinking, and his work. But it does not include the sphere of the gangster, the altruist, or the dictator. A man thinks and works alone. A man cannot rob, exploit, or rule alone. Robbery, exploitation, and ruling presupposes victims. They imply dependence. They are the province of the second-hander. Rulers of men are not egotists. They create nothing. They exist entirely through the persons of others. Their goal is in their subjects, in the activity of enslaving. They are as dependent as a beggar, the social worker, and the bandit. The form of dependence does not matter. But men were taught to regard second-handers, tyrants, emperors, dictators as exponents of egotism. By this fraud, they were made to destroy the ego themselves and others. The purpose of the fraud was to destroy the creators, or to harness them, which is a synonym. From the beginning of history, the two antagonists have stood face to face, the creator and the second-hander. When the first creator invented the wheel, the first second-hander responded. He invented altruism. The creator denied, opposed, persecuted, exploited, went on, moved forward, and carried all humanity along on his energy. The second-hander contributed nothing to the process except the impediments. The contest has another name, the individual against the collective. The common good of a collective, a race, a class, a state, was the claim and justification of every tyranny ever established over men. Every major horror of history was committed in the name of an altruistic motive. Has any act of selfishness ever equaled the carnage perpetuated by disciples of altruism? Does the fault lie in men's hypocrisy or in the nature of the principle? The most dreadful butchers were the most sincere. They believed in the perfect society reached through the guillotine and the firing squad. Nobody questioned their right to murder since they were murdering for an altruistic purpose. It was accepted that man must be sacrificed for other men. Actors change, but the course of the tragedy remains the same. A humanitarian who starts with a declaration of love for mankind and ends with a sea of blood. It goes on and will go on so long as man believes that an action is good if it is unselfish. That permits the altruist to act and force his victims to bear it. The leaders of collective movements ask nothing for themselves, but observe the results. The only good which men can do for one another and the only statement of their proper relationship is hands off. Now, observe the results of a society built on the principle of individualism. This, our country, the noblest country in history of men, the country of the greatest achievement, greatest prosperity, greatest freedom. This country was not based on selfless service, sacrifice, renunciation, or any other precept of altruism. It was based on a man's right to the pursuit of happiness, his own happiness, not anyone else's, a private, personal, selfish motive. Look at the results. Look into your own conscience. It is an ancient conflict. Men have come close to the truth, but it was destroyed each time, and one civilization fell after another. Civilization is the progress towards a society of privacy. The savage's whole existence in public, ruled by the laws of his tribes. Civilization is the process of setting man free from men. Now, in our age, collectivism, the rule of the second-hander and the second-rater, the ancient monster, has broken loose and is running amok. It has brought men to a level of intellectual indecency never equaled on earth. It reached a scale of horror without precedent. It has poisoned every mind. It has swallowed most of Europe. It is engulfing our country. I am an architect. I know what it is to come by the principle on which it is built. We are approaching a world in which I cannot permit myself to live. Now, you know why I dynamited Cortland? I designed Cortland. I gave it to you. I destroyed it. I destroyed it because I did not choose to let it exist. I was a double monster, in form and implication. I had to blast both. The form was mutilated by two second-handers who assumed the right to improve upon that which they had not made and could not equal. They were permitted to do it by the general implication that the altruistic purpose of the building superseded all rights and that I had no claim to stand against it. I agreed to design Cortland for the purpose of seeing it erected as I designed it, and for no other reason. That was the price that I set for my own work. I was not paid. I do not blame Peter Keating. He was helpless. He had a contract with the employers. It was ignored. He had a promise that the structure he offered would be built as designed. The promise was broken. The love of a man for the integrity of his work and his right to preserve it are now considered a vague intangible and an inessential. You have heard the prosecutor say that. Why was the building disfigured? For no reason. Such acts never have any reason unless it's the vanity of some second-hander who feel they have a right to anyone else's property, spiritual or material. Who permitted them to do that? No particular man among the dozens in authority. No one cared to permit it or to stop it. No one was responsible. No one can be held to account. Such is the nature of all collective action. I did not receive the payment I asked, but the owners of the Cortland got what they needed from me. They wanted a scheme devised to build a structure as cheaply as possible. They found no one else who could do it to their satisfaction. I could and did. They took the benefit of my work and made me contribute it as a gift. But I am not an altruist. I do not contribute gifts of this nature. It is said that I have destroyed the home of the destitute. It is forgotten that, but for me the destitute could not have had this particular home. Those who were concerned with the poor had to come to me, who have never been concerned in order to help the poor. It is believed that the poverty of the future tenants gave them the right of my work, that their need constituted claim on my life. that it was my duty to contribute anything demanded of me. This is the second-hander's credo, now swallowing the world. I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to a minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine, no matter who makes the claim, how large their number, or how great their need. I wish to come here and say that I am a man who does not exist for others. It had to be said. The world is perishing from an orgy of self-sacrificing. I wish to come here and say that the integrity of a man's creative work is of greater importance than any charitable endeavor. Those of you who do not understand this are the men who are destroying the world. I wish to come here and state my terms. I do not care to exist on any others. I recognize no obligation toward men except one, to respect their freedom and to take no part in a slave society. To my country, I wish to give the 10 years which I spend in jail if my country exists no longer. I will spend them in memory and in gratitude for what my country has been. It will be my act of loyalty, my refusal to live or work in what has taken its place. My act of loyalty to every creator who ever lived and was made to suffer by the force responsible for the Cortland I dynamited. To every tortured hour of loneliness, denial, frustration, abuse he was made to spend, and the battles he won. To every creator whose name is known, and to every creator who lived, struggled, and perished unrecognized before he could achieve. To every creator who was destroyed in body or in spirit, to Henry Cameron, to Stephen Mallory, to Stephen Mallory, to a man who doesn't want to be named, but who is sitting in this courtroom and knows that I'm speaking to him.
There's a lot in that speech, and it's a lot to do with living for yourself, living for what your goals are, and not bowing down to the thoughts or the needs of the collective. You are not selfish for not giving in to somebody else's demand for your time, your energy, your being. And we're seeing a lot of that all over the political spectrum, but also all over the creative spectrum. A demand where you write what I want you to write, a demand where you work when I want you to work. And look at the part of Roark's speech where he's talking about other men coming in to change what he has made and destroy the integrity of the building. I'm going to have a video about something like that coming on Thursday. But we see this all over the creative spectrum. I know that I see it all the time when I'm looking for agents, or when I was looking for agents, when I was looking for publishers. Then none of them create. They repackage, or they steal, or they wait for somebody that they can go and attack, like you, Anita Sarkeesian, and so many of these other grifters that look for an opportunity to pounce on something to make money instead of being able to live off their own ideas because they don't have any. Whenever you're feeling down, whenever you're worried about, is this idea too much? Is this idea not good enough? Is this idea going to get me attacked? Consider this speech where everybody who ever did something revolutionary, who offered gifts to mankind like the wheel, like fire, like the airplane, they were considered crazy. They were considered losers. They were considered evil, whatever at their time. The popular opinion was against them. If you're going to create something new, something fresh, something that brings a different perspective, you should not be expecting people to swing their arms out to hold you. You're bringing something new, and it might even be painful. You might be writing something that has sexual assault in it. You might be writing something that exposes a deep, dark truth. Think of George Orwell, and when he wrote 1984, it took years to get that published, and there are people that hate him and hate it today. There are people who hate this book and hate Ayn Rand today. So this was, I forgot to mention it earlier, this was a segment from Ayn Rand's book, The Fountainhead, and I'm gonna finish off with another part because there's another part that I really want to share. But you'll find so many people that aggressively respond when you say Ayn Rand or objectivism with anger or hatred, or they'll have that response ready for, oh, you think selfishness is a good thing? Let's look at selfishness and altruism and collectivism and individualism in the way that Ayn Rand talks about it, and let's have an honest conversation. But if you go and look into the deep circles, not even that deep, it's really the shallow circles, let's be honest, of Ayn Rand and her ideas and her philosophy, and I'm not saying any of it's perfect, because everybody's got wrong ideas. Some people have good ideas. I'm not going to say everybody has good ideas, but everybody, even a clock is right twice. So there's a lot of resistance to looking at her ideas and these ideas that she says in her books and in her philosophies that are quickly shut down by guess who? Can you guess who? Can you guess who hates her? It's the second-handers. It's almost entirely second-handers, if not entirely second-handers. So if you're ever feeling, should I not do this? Think about, and if you're questioning your own worth based on what other people have told you, for one, I think that you should read Ayn Rand's book Fountainhead just to see the ideas in it. Note that it is hefty. It's not as hefty as Atlas Shrugged, but there are good ideas in it. But the most important thing that you can do for yourself, and this is where the closing monologue that I'm going to read is going to come from. It's going to be much shorter than the opening monologue, I swear. The most important thing that you can do for yourself as a creator or even as an individual in general is do not derive your value from what other people think of you. Derive your value from what you know is the value of your work. Now, this can get into some iffy situations because there's horseshoe theory where stuff always gets. You gotta find the nice middle, otherwise you get messed up. Too much. We're gonna stick it with the talking in the sense of as a creator, but it's important to know when you're working on something what your goals are, the things that you kind of want, at least generally. What are you trying to say? What's important to you about your story? So that when you receive feedback, you can differentiate if it's that person's personal taste or if they're actually talking about the craft. And if you are confident in yourself, if you know, and we're not talking about like cocky, we're not talking about over the top, we're just talking about what you want to do, you know what you're trying to say, and you do not derive your value from other people's opinions, but from yourself, and then you'll be able to take their comments and pull out what you need from them and move on. If, however, you derive most of your esteem and your value from whether other people give you their approval, you're going to have a much harder time succeeding, and you're going to have more emotional roller coasters because you can't control somebody else's opinion. You can only control how you respond to that opinion. Find that nice medium of deriving your value based on the work that you know you're doing. And you can get a better example of this by reading The Fountainhead, because that's kind of one of the big things throughout that you see with the main character and one of the antagonists is the difference between the value of finding value for yourself within yourself versus finding your value by what other people say about you. And knowing your own personal value, this is completely separate. When you're receiving a critique or somebody's talking about your story, you also need to not be so proud that you can't objectively take in the story, or that you can't objectively take in the response and analyze the response, or else you end up with something like this on Amazon. Nobody should be asking anybody to pay for this. But the power of your success is all in you. You telling yourself that. And you'll believe anything that you tell yourself. So, tell yourself the truth. Tell yourself that you can do it. And stop giving other people so much power with their opinions. Because are you writing your story for Jan over there who gets freaked out about everything that you're writing? No, there are people out there who enjoy what you're working on, who enjoy the motifs and the drama and the story that you're telling, and there are people out there who need to see the story that you're telling. So don't write it, and don't derive your value from that person over there who has zero interest in your genre or your trauma or any of that. Write it because it's an important thing for you to talk about. Write it because it's an important subject or story for you to share. You want to make people feel good, or you want to bring this issue to the table, or you want to share this perspective. Derive your value from that and not from the opinions of others, and you will be so far ahead of your peers in mental health and stability, you don't even know. And with that said, I'm going to do the closer right now, and it's in the nature of the second-hander. Just to give a little more context, I'm going to do this closing monologue now, which is the nature of the second-hander, which will build on this other idea of deriving your value from yourself. All right? So.
It's what I couldn't understand about people for a long time. They have no self. They live within others. They live secondhand. Look at Peter Keating. I've looked at him, at what's left of him, and it's helped me to understand. He's paying the price and wondering for what sin, and telling himself that he's been too selfish. In what act or thought of his has ever been a self? What was the aim in his life? Greatness in other people's eyes. Fame, admiration, envy, all of which comes from others. Others dictated his convictions, which he did not hold, but he was satisfied that others believed he held them. Others were his motive power and his prime concern. He didn't want to be great, but to be thought great. He didn't want to build, but to be admired as a builder. He borrowed from others in order to make an impression on others. That's your actual selflessness. It's his ego that he's betrayed and given up. But everybody calls him a selfish. Isn't that the root of everybody's despicable action? Not selfishness, but precisely the absence of self. Look at them. The man who cheats and lies but preserves a respectful front. He knows himself to be dishonest, but others think that he's honest, and he derives his self-respect from that, second-hand. The man who takes credit for an achievement which is not his own. He knows himself to be mediocre, but he's great in the eyes of others. The frustrated wretch who professes love for the inferior and clings to those less endowed in order to establish his own superiority by comparison. They're second-handers. They have no concern for facts, ideas, or work. They're concerned with other people. They don't ask, is this true? They ask, is this what others think is true? Not to judge, but to repeat. Not to do, but to give impressions of doing. Not creation, but show. Not ability, but friendship. Not merit, but pull. What would happen to the world without those who do, think, work, produce? They are the egotists. You don't think through another's brain, and you don't work through another's hands. When you suspend your faculty of independent judgment, you suspend consciousness. To stop consciousness is to stop life. Second-handers have no sense of reality. Their reality is not within them, but somewhere in that space which divides one human body from another. Not an entity, but a relation, anchored to nothing. That's the emptiness I couldn't understand in people. That's what stopped me whenever I faced a committee. Men without an ego, opinion without a rational process, motion without brakes or motor, power without responsibility. The second-hander acts, but the source of his action is scattered in every other living person. It's everywhere and nowhere, and you can't reason with him. He's not open to reason. You can't speak to him. He can't hear. You're tried by an empty bench, a blind mass running amok to crush you without a sense of purpose. Notice how they'll accept anything except a man who stands alone. They recognize him at once. There's a special, insidious kind of hatred for him. They forgive criminals. They admire dictators. Crime and violence are a tie, a form of mutual dependence. They need ties. They've got to force their miserable little personalities on every single person they meet. The independent man kills them because they don't exist within him, and that's the only form of existence they know. Notice the maligned kind of resentment against any idea that propounds independence. Notice the malice toward an independent man. After centuries of being pounded with the doctrine that altruism is the ultimate ideal, men have accepted it the only way it could be accepted, by seeking self-esteem through others, by living second hand, and it has opened the way for every kind of horror. It has become the dreadful form of selfishness, which is truly selfish man couldn't have conceived. And now, to cure the world perishing from selfishness, we're asked to destroy the self. Listen to what is being preached today. Look at everyone around us. You've wondered why they suffer, why they seek happiness and never find it? If any man stopped and asked himself whether he's held a truly personal desire, he'd find the answer. He'd see that all of his wishes, his efforts, his dreams, his ambitions are motivated by other men. He's not really struggling, even for material wealth, but for the second-hander's delusion. Prestige. A stamp of approval, not his own. He can find no joy in the struggle and no joy when he has succeeded. He can't say about a single thing, this is what I wanted because I wanted it, not because I made my neighbors gape at me. Then he wonders why he's unhappy. Every form of happiness is private. Our greatest moments are personal, self-motivated, not to be touched. The things which are sacred or precious to us are the things we withdraw from promiscuous sharing. But now we are taught to throw everything within us into public life and common pawing, to seek joy in meeting halls. We haven't even got a word for the quality, for the self-sufficiency of man's spirit. It's difficult to call it selfishness or egotism. The words have been perverted. They've come to mean Peter Keating. Gale, I think the only cardinal evil on Earth is that of placing your prime concern with other men. I've always demanded a certain quality in the people I liked. I've always recognized it at once. And it's the only quality I respect in men. I chose my friends by that. Now I know what it is. A self-sufficient ego. Nothing else matters.
So reflecting on this last passage here, just think about how you might be seeing this in modern day, because just rereading it, like I read this, I haven't read Fountainhead by Ayn Rand in a couple of years, but even when I first read this monologue, or these couple of monologues, I could already think of parallels, and I could already see the second-handers, and honestly, with what's going on right now and in the last couple of months, and to some extent what we can see coming in the future based on certain political people and their policies, you've got the policies of the second-handers and the policies of the independents. You've got the policies of the men who live for themselves, the creators, the egotists, if you will. No, obviously kind of perverted meaning there, but you've got the policies of the creators and the designers and the individuals, and then you've got the policies of the parasites that depend on your subjugation. What we saw over the weekend in DC, it was a fight between the individuals and the parasites. And I don't mean that in some kind of dangerous or derogative way. I mean that in the fight between the individuals and the second-handers. The people who live for themselves, that want to live for themselves, and those that live through the prestige and the opinions of others. And it is a miserable place to be. Why do you think they're always so miserable? Why do you think the second-handers are trying to cancel Christmas and Thanksgiving? Why do you think they are so angry that you won't just give up and stay on the ground? But, you know, what do I know? I just wanted to share these passages because I think they're really great. I'm just a robot, though. Let me know what you think in these down below. I will also link to this book on Goodreads, so if you want to check it out for yourself, it's easy to find, and I hope you will. I enjoyed it, but again, there are a lot of haters to Ayn Rand and objectivism. But what do I know? I'm just a robot. Let me know your thoughts on all of this and more. If you have anything you'd like me to cover, also leave the comments down below. And I love talking to you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Until next time, thanks for stopping in, and don't die. Dear Madam Astra, that's me. We regret to inform you that on August 1st, your employer, Agatha Jane Benedict, owner of the Benedict estate, peacefully passed away in her sleep. Oh, that's so sad. Wait. Let me try that again. Oh my goodness. That's so sad. Yeah, I think I'm ready. With millions of dollars on the line and the opportunity for your every need to be taken care of for life. Tell me, is there anything more valuable than that? I didn't think so. Dead End Drive is a dark comedy novel that makes 3 promises. 1, an illustrious estate in Louisiana. 2, an opulent dinner affair for all in attendance. And 3, and most importantly of all, lots and lots of competitive murder. So if you're looking for a cozy book to settle in with for the spooky season, I've only got one question for you. Will I see you at the whale reading?